Wow, what an inspiring result in the US presidential election. I have to say, Labour, senior figures in the Labour government, senior figures in the Labour Party, already embarrassing themselves with how short sighted and petty they have been. Before I get to that, though, let me just say this. I'm incredibly optimistic about the future because what the US presidential election has shown is that mainstream media now is the bubble. It's an echo chamber. It has substantially lost the ability to set narratives. You saw some ridiculous polling, and I have to say the US polling industry is a complete disgrace. The selective picking out of information, such as that Iowa poll that had Kamala Harris ahead a few days before the election. In the end, of course, Trump won Iowa by a landslide. They all pretty much ignored the Atlas Intel poll that Isla highlighted that was the most accurate of 2020, showing that Trump was on course to win the battleground states. But look, the likes of Elon Musk, of Joe Rogan, of the ability for little channels like mine and many, many others that are bigger to reach big audiences, that is very, very exciting. And the genie is not going back in the bottle. Mainstream media, they had their chance to actually listen to people after the Brexit vote, after the Trump 2016 victory. They decided to double down and rather than inform people, try and influence people and try and lecture you and tell you what to think. It has backfired spectacularly. And that is why you're now going to see the continuing decline of mainstream media. And as I said, people now have the choice, don't they, to get their news from a whole range of sources. And it's actually very meritocratic in many ways here on YouTube. You know, either you build an audience and listen to your audience and don't condescend your audience, or you do all those things as we see so often done by mainstream media, talking down to people as if they're morons. We've all had enough of it, I think, and that's why they're declining. But look, in terms of the Labour Party, clearly at odds now with a Trump, as Richard Tice, the Reform MP and Deputy Leader, highlights now. Trump's plan in many ways is what we need in the UK. Drill, baby, drill. And a huge deportation plan now for illegal migrants, including foreign criminals. By the way, one other post-election narrative some of the media are trying to set is that this is all fueled, the Trump victory was all fueled by young men. Actually, Trump performed better with female voters in this election than he ever has done before. But look, in terms of the Labour Party, we've seen some very petulant, ill-advised comments over the years from many in Labour. And being reported already here, Trump not exactly impressed with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We've had, of course, David Lammy, who I think is the Foreign Secretary. Him being Foreign Secretary is an embarrassment, really. Shown himself over the years to be very immature and petulant when it comes to these little digs he's made over the years against Trump. And, of course, you had that pretty deranged, exposing really how intolerant many in the left sadly now are, even debating that they could ban Trump from the country back in 2016. So Labour in a pretty bad place here, but someone emerging as a statesman and putting country before party is Nigel Farage, who has put out the statement that he might not agree with what Starmer and his cabinet stand for, but he believes in something called the national interest, will do all he can to bridge the divide between the Starmer government and the president-elect, because it's in the national interest. And yeah, Nigel, speaking to ITV on this yesterday, what a contrast, I think, to some, as I said, of those extremely juvenile, petulant, ill-advised comments we've seen from senior Labour figures.
Okay, but what about the relationship that this government, do you think, will have with Mr Trump? I mean, there's been some quite, strong criticism of him. David Lammy called him a tyrant in a toupee. He might choose to disagree with that. William Hague, he's a very sober commentator normally. He called him a serious danger. Just a couple of days ago, he said, we need him to lose.
Yeah, and, you know, Sadiq Khan, the Labour mayor of London, has had almost a sort of 10-year running feud with Trump. Look, things have been said by British leading Labour politicians in government about him that were pretty horrible. That won't disappear overnight. But the one thing I've learned, knowing Trump over the years, is he does forgive people. You know, he does forgive people. Boris Johnson said some pretty beastly things about him. He was forgiven. Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, a very senior Republican, said some awful things about him, and yet he was forgiven. And the same goes for J.D. Vance. So look, this relationship can be mended, and it must be mended. Our trade relationship with America is vital, and if they're going to start putting tariffs on overseas products, we need a negotiation. We've got to start rolling out the red carpet now to make sure that doesn't happen to us, and I believe that that is achievable. Plus our intelligence sharing, defence, this relationship really, really matters. And I think the Labour government are going to have to work very hard at this.